So you've signed up to the Showit platform, you're now shopping for your gorgeous new website design, and you want to know if it performs well from an SEO point of view. Awesome, this tutorial is going to be great for you. My name's Karen, I'm an SEO consultant, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to use a couple of tools to see how well a design performs from an SEO point of view. Those tools can be used on your competitors' websites to see how their sites perform as well, and on your current website. So let's dive into having a look at some best practice guidelines first. It's going to pop me in the corner. So we're going to look at Google's kind of latest core web vitals. Now there's some best practice guidelines around how fast our website should load to provide a great user experience. I'm going to link to this report in the text underneath the video. Now if we just scroll down, we're not going to go through all of this, don't worry. If we scroll down, and the important kind of bit, I mean, I would recommend reading it, but the important bit is that your website should load under 2.5 seconds, okay? Now, longer than that is okay, but it would suggest that it needs improvement, and more than 4 seconds is poor. Now, the level of loading is described as a kind of largest contentful paint. So what that means is that it's not your website hasn't 100% fully loaded, but it's the amount of time to render the largest content element visible in the viewport. So what that means is within 2.5 seconds, the user needs to see some information loaded on your site. It needs to see the site actually loading up so that it doesn't look as if your site is broken. So you can read into this in a bit more detail. Feel free to, I think, have a look through all of this report. It's got some real kind of interesting information in it. But this is actually reported within Google Search Console as well. If we head over to Google Search Console now, this is my photography site, and you'll see that Core Web Vitals is mentioned here. So if we click on there, we'll be able to see if there was any issues or not. Now, I did previously have issues on my site with performance, and then I moved hosting companies. I moved the site over to Localhost. So I didn't have to do anything on the site. It just improved when I changed to a better quality hosting company. So it's not necessarily the design that could be causing an issue with your load time. Often it's the server you're on. However, with Showit, the server is really well optimized, and it is set up to be like a kind of really good fast loading system. And just to kind of talk about that for a minute, with Showit websites, you don't need cache plugin, you don't need image optimization, because that's all done server side. So Showit is set up to be really fast and efficient and really kind of perform really well already without you having to do extra work. It's just really important that you size your photos properly, and also don't try and put too many things on the one page so you end up with massive, massive pages. The design does influence that though. Things like loading custom fonts can take time and slow things down. Instagram feeds can slow things down. Having some kind of embedded code on the pages can slow things down as well. So there are things that you can do that can affect that performance in a negative way. And when you're looking at designs, you want to make sure that those designs have been put together in a way that is not going to cause any issues in terms of slow and loading of your website, or any negative performance related things that you wouldn't be able to sort easily. So I want to just show you a couple of tools that you can use to look at designs before you make that purchase. Let's pop me back in the corner again. So we're going to head to the Chrome extension store, and we're going to look for a Chrome extension called Lighthouse. And Lighthouse is a tool that Google provides for free. It's really designed for web developers, so it is a little bit geeky. You don't need to understand it all, but what you can see is the score that it gives for different sites. So this is what it looks like. I've already got it installed. I just wanted to show you so you were familiar with what you're looking for when you go and install it in your browser. So let's move on to actually loading this up. So this is the default Showit theme. They're kind of simple, one of their free themes. And we've ran the Lighthouse report for that. Now I'm just going to show you how to do that. It does take a few minutes, and I have already ran one just to save a bit of time. But you see the little lighthouse up here in the bar at the top of the screen, just between keywords everywhere and the zoom icon. if you click on that whenever you're on the page that you wanted to assess, and then just click Generate Report. And what that's going to do is have a look at that page and assess things like performance, which includes the kind of load time, accessibility, best practice, and SEO. Now, word of caution, none of the SEO scores are going to be green because these are demos. They're not going to be optimized with meta descriptions and alt text and things like that. But it's still worth having a look and seeing what is contributing to the score. So what we can see right away is that the largest contentful paint score, which is the important one, is 6.4 seconds. However, it's worth noting that I am currently in Glasgow in Scotland, and the server for this website is in somewhere in the US, I'm not sure where, possibly Arizona. So that's going to have an influencing factor. It does use Cloudflare, so that should reduce any time from accessing it from elsewhere in the world. But what I've noticed is that using other tools where I can select the location does have a bit of an influence on how long that largest contentful paint score is. So at the moment it's shown as 6.4 seconds, but looking at it on another tool called GTmetrix, so it's just gtmetrix.com. I'd highly recommend that you sign up and get an account here. It means that you can change the server location, and I will link to that in the text underneath as well. But what we see is a different score on here. So this is only 1.9 seconds. Still a bit higher than I would like. I'd kind of ideally be looking for it to be an A and really just over a second. But we can have a look and see why that score is coming up as it is. Right, I've got two of these loading up. Let's have a look. Okay, so if we dig into what's kind of causing the score for accessibility, best practices, and SEO, let's click on accessibility. So one of the issues here is that the background and foreground colours do not have sufficient contrast ratio. That's a pretty easy fix. And what we can see is that the failing elements are the word send and that number 01. Now, I wasn't going to keep that number on my design anyway if I was going to go for this. If we just go back to the page, we can see it's this number here. Now, this number is meant to be part of the background, but it doesn't really make sense, I think, having that as a text element. It's more of a kind of illustrative visual element. So changing that to maybe being like a photo or something that wasn't shown as being text is going to solve that problem, because you kind of don't really need to have that clearer, you know, it would actually mess with the design. So it really should be, I think, labelled as a design rather than text element, and that would correct that issue. The word send, so let's go check where that is. I think it's the send button in the form. So it's saying that the contrast ratio is not quite enough for that. When we talk about contrast ratio best practice, Google wants the web to be accessible for everyone. So having sufficient contrast means that it's really clear and easy to read for those that might have sight difficulties. And if you've got a client using their phone in awkward lighting situation, or they're in an environment that's not ideal for being able to have the best lighting situation for viewing things, then having really good clear contrast and clearly labelled things is going to make things a bit easier. Personally, I think the contrast is okay there, but just nudging that down a couple of shades would probably make a difference and get rid of that off the score, because it's not far off being okay. I think the contrast is enough, but I think if it was the sort of thing where that was all it was, you could kind of safely just ignore that, really. So this issue about the element does not have lang attribute. All of your Showit sites are going to have that, because Showit sites are set up to be in English as a default, but there's no country targeting. So if you were working on a WordPress site that wasn't Showit, then you would have a language and a location selected based on your target market. So that would be EN-US for Americans, or EN-GB. So that's English UK, instead of being English in Australia or New Zealand. And that does help Google know who you're specifically targeting. Showit sites don't have that. So that's why it's actually even more important to have location information on the page, because you're not given that in the language. And that's something that is a characteristic of the Showit platform. I will be doing more testing with multiple languages and location targeting in future. So check out the future tutorials on that. They're not live yet, but I will link to them underneath when they are. So the next one is image elements do not have alt attributes. That's a quick fix. We know when we add our own photos, we're going to be adding alt text. At the moment, these are not my photos. They're like the default theme photos. So they're not going to have alt text on them. So that's not something to be concerned about. The links not having a discernible name, that's something that should be able to be corrected in the settings. Ideally though, it would be already taken care of in the design and then you wouldn't have to worry about it. So yeah, that's ideally that just wouldn't be there and it would be dealt with at the design level. If we look on best practices, we can kind of ignore this because we're going to be having HTTPS activated on our theme. So this isn't really a realistic example of how things will be. And the links to cross-origin destinations are just because there's links on the site to other HTTP content that isn't secure. So again, that's not going to be representative of our live environment on our site, so we can disregard that. This alert around front-end JavaScript libraries with known security vulnerabilities, I've seen this in pretty much every Showit website I've looked at, I think. So that is a characteristic of the platform. You should be able to get a kind of higher score with that though. You should be able to get in the green area. So I'm confident that this would be green for best practices. Once we're looking at our live site. And then if we look at the SEO score, you'll see that the indexing is blocked at the moment, which is normal for like a demo site. And the only other negative scores are a lack of meta description and no alt text, and we're going to need to be adding those anyway. So really, this should score okay. We should be able to improve the score of this. I think the GT metrics report can be a little bit simpler though, in terms of breaking down that information. It's definitely a bit less geeky and a bit more visual. And you can see the largest contentful paint score here is kind of more prominent at the top, whereas in the Lighthouse report there's a lot of different numbers on there. And we can see that the eliminating render block and resources, if we click on that, we can see what those issues are. And part of it's a delay because of a font loading. I'm not sure what some of these other things are. The sliding galleries do slow load time, not just on Showit sites, of any sites, because the whole gallery needs to load. So having static photos rather than sliders is definitely more efficient and is going to help any website load faster. So this is why I avoid sliding galleries on my own sites. But what you could do is send this to the designer and ask them if these are things that could be optimized or updated. Not every design that I looked at in the design store had these same issues. And I've been looking at a variety of different things with a view to purchasing my own design for this project. And some did score way, way better. If we just have a look at, let's go back to the Showit store and maybe have a look at a couple of the podcast designs that I was looking at. This one, for example, which I thought was really gorgeous. We have a look at the live demo. Now, what I would say is that this comparison works for Showit because all of the Showit sites are on the same server. But if you're looking at a non-Showit website, then the performance is going to be influenced by the server that website is on. And it might be that hosting performs better than yours. So if we change the location here to Texas and pop this in here, we'll be able to see what the kind of elements are on this page and how efficient loading it is, what the largest contentful paint is. And that will maybe help influence our decision of whether this is something that we can buy that we're not going to have to do a lot of work to, or whether we're going to have a bit of optimization work. What I did see in the store is some of the pages that had lots and lots of photos on them, or lots of links to like blogs and podcasts and things that take that bit longer to load. So the largest contentful paint on this, 0.9 seconds. That's really good. Also, you can see there's no render blocking issues here at all. Everything's like green. I would feel confident buying this and knowing that it was going to perform really well and that I wasn't going to have a whole load of work to do in terms of optimizing things. What I did see with this design as well is on the Lighthouse Report, out of all the podcast template designs, this was the only one that had any green score on it at all, which is really good. And I think when you're comparing prices of themes and the value, having a theme that is just designed really well with kind of clean, tidy code and complying with best practices is essentially just going to save you work. So you see here the largest contentful paint score is shown at 4 seconds, but actually it's less on GT metrics when we looked at location. Best practices, 93 out of 100, so we're just not even going to need to bother. You see it's literally only the JavaScript library issue, and that's a Showit characteristic. So really, I think this is really good. I'm not 100%, I've not made my final decision about what I'm buying yet, but out of all the podcast designs that are currently in the Showit store, this had the best performance, and it's also gorgeous. So hopefully that gives you some ideas, some tools to use in terms of being able to see how websites perform. So we've looked at a couple of tools there, GT Metrics and the Lighthouse, which is a Chrome extension. And I would highly recommend that you sign up for an account with GT Metrics, which is completely free. They have just recently introduced paid for versions, but they're not necessary for kind of single users. So stick with a free account. Remember to change your location before you do a search for a site, and add the Lighthouse extension to Chrome. And happy shopping for a new website design. Any questions, feel free to reach out and send me an email. Until then, I'll see you all in the next video.